D&D player characters normally fill one or more of the following party roles: tank, utility, damage dealer, support, and explorer. This video will not talk about those. However, I do plan on diving deeper into each of those roles in a later video. Today we're going to discuss table roles. These are the roles each player has in the game outside of game mechanics. These can go hand in hand with the roles I mentioned earlier, but they are based more on player personality and mindset. This video is an idea spurred by a comment on Blue Sky by my friend Volks. His initial comment was about the general player roles, but upon seeing this image he sent, and the first role listed, Instigator, it made me want to discuss something about D&D that I normally don't see being discussed. Hi, my name is Rich and I'm a first-time DM and long-time player. Let's look at what role or roles each player fills at the table from a personality standpoint, the upside and downside to each, the key to playing each, and an idea of what classes are normally played by people in those roles. What are the roles? As I mentioned in the intro, there are standard roles a PC fills when it comes to in-game mechanics, but there are also roles that the players themselves will fill at the table level. Keep in mind, just like the game mechanic roles, one player can fill multiple roles. And just because I say a class normally plays a role doesn't mean it has to be that way. The beauty of Dungeons & Dragons is that you can play any class however you want. The stupid barbarian can actually be the best note-taker, for example. Number 1, the instigator. Every table needs an instigator. The instigator is the one that will drive decisions forward. Without an instigator, the party usually ends up in analysis paralysis. A 10-minute planning discussion has now taken an hour, and not a single decision was made or die roll. The instigator may also be the one that decides to just break the door down or run forward in combat. Upside. The biggest upside to this player is the game will not be boring. No discussion will take too long, and analysis paralysis will be a thing of the past. The game will continually be moved forward and decisions made quickly. The downside. The biggest downside to this player is that being quick to act doesn't necessarily mean it was the right thing to do. Sometimes planning is necessary. Sometimes not kicking in the door is best. Many combats are joined too early due to an instigator moving ahead of what the party wanted to do. The key. Find a balance between recognizing when the party is stuck and the game is going nowhere and acting too quickly and possibly ruining the game for the rest of the players. Typical classes. I generally have found that most of these players tend to play rogues or barbarians. Rogues love to just go off and check out the hallway ahead while the party decides which path to take, and barbarians love to just rage and interrupt the BBG's monologue with an axe to their head. Number 2, the note-taker. Every table needs a note-taker. Who were you supposed to talk to in town? What city were you supposed to go to next? What magic items did we get from the dungeon? The note-taker knows all the answers to these questions. Without a note-taker, the party may flounder when it comes to the details, meaning the DM will constantly have to remind the players of everything. The upside. The biggest upside of this player is nothing the party is told or given will ever be forgotten. When the campaign takes a break for the holidays and several sessions are skipped, the note-taker will remind the party exactly what happened last session. Downside. The biggest downside to this is the player can be so involved in taking notes that they miss a key point from an NPC or may not be following along as closely as they should. The key. You don't need to write everything down the DM or other players say. Keep your notes concise. Write down just the key information. Who, what, when, and where. A second key to being a note-taker is to be sure you can read your notes. I don't know how many times a month will pass between sessions, and when we start back up again, I can't read my notes at all. And all the context of being in the moment is long gone, and there's no way of deciphering what I wrote. Or I have to look back on notes a year later to find an NPC's name, only to have it be basically a blur on the page. Typical classes. I generally have found that most of these players tend to play wizards or clerics. The ability to recall information by the player fits perfectly with their character's ability to recall the information. Number 3, the I'm just here to hit things player. This player is, as the name describes, at the table for one reason: get into combat and smack around some goblins. The upside. The biggest upside to this player is their character will be built for combat. They will do a ton of damage and probably take a lot of damage too. Your party's chances of survival in combat have probably increased with this type of player at the table. The downside. The biggest downside to this player is that everything outside of combat may be boring to them. If the campaign leans more towards the social or exploration pillars, this player will not be happy. Anytime the party spends shopping may be met with grumbles from this player, in and out of character. The key. Don't ruin the out of combat times complaining. Bide your time for when combat happens. After all, D&D is primarily a combat-based game. And when combat does occur, do your thing. Excel in that aspect of the game and try to enjoy the other aspects. Typical classes. I generally found that most of these players tend to play barbarians and fighters. Those classes are mainly in the game to hit things, so they go hand in hand with these players. Number 4, the I'm here to break your world player. This player wants to make the most optimized character using only the most busted combinations and builds to see how far the rules and boundaries of the DM's world can be pushed. The upside. The biggest upside to this player is there will be amazing moments when their build or combination does something truly wondrous. They do a ton of damage in one round or use an item in a unique way that does something unexpected. You will find yourself saying wow many times with this player at the table. The downside. The biggest downside of this player is they will push what the DM allows to happen at the table and in their world to the limit. They're always trying to come up with something crazy. They also may not like it when other players at the table don't do something optimally, which could lead to other issues at the table. The key. Work with the DM and respect what they will allow at the table. Also, respect the other player's choices and playstyle. The fastest way to be asked to leave a table is to start complaining that another player didn't pick the right spell, didn't do something you would have done, or to straight out start telling the other players what to do. Typical classes. I generally found that most of these players tend to play wizards due to the craziness that spells bring to the table. Or they will multi-class, usually taking at least 1 or 2 levels in several classes to make the perfect character. Number 5, the theater kid. This is the player that D&D was made for. They dive headfirst into the character and live for the acting part of the game. The upside. The biggest upside to this player is just how much they throw themselves into their character. Roleplay will be this player's bread and butter. Normally they use a different voice and character and will let the tears fall if the moment calls for it. Downside. The biggest downside to this player is they may go ham and bring an aspect of overacting to the game. They may also be the only one at the table with this mindset, so there may not be others that dive into the RP aspect of the game as deep as they do, leaving them alone on the stage, so to speak. The key. Don't overdo it. Play this role to the level the table is happy with. Not every speech has to rival Shakespeare, and not every joke in your head must be said out loud. Play with the other players at the table, not against them. Typical classes. The Bard. The Bard class was made for the theater kid. While a theater kid can excel in all classes, the Bard is usually the best choice because it will allow them to unleash everything they have, and is usually still in character. Be sure to give me a thumbs up if you like this video so far. Also, it seems over 90% of my viewers are not subscribed, so please subscribe if you haven't already. If you aren't subscribed, leave me a comment with a suggestion for what I can do to better earn your subscription. Number 6, the I'm just here to hang player. This is the player that is at the table to have a few drinks, eat some snacks, and enjoy being with friends. The upside. The biggest upside to this player is they are normally pretty relaxed. Nothing that happens in-game seems to bother them, and they aren't out to take the spotlight. The downside. The biggest downside to this player is that attention to what is happening may be lacking. They may be on their phone if it isn't their turn, or they may drag another player into a side conversation about something out of game. They may have no idea what they're going to do in combat when it is their turn. They are there to be with their friends. Rolling dice and playing a game is secondary. The key. Pay attention and realize the other players are probably at the table for the game itself. So what happens does matter to them. You may be at the table that for everyone the game is secondary, but if not, keep the non-game conversations to a minimum and know when it is your turn to act and what you will do on your turn. Typical classes. These players tend to stick to the easier classes to play, such as Champion Fighter. They usually don't want anything too involved, as that is not why they are at the table. While they can play any class, ones with less options are generally their go-to. Number 7, the All-Star. This is the player that all DMs want at their table. They always come prepared to play, they bring the best out in other players, and they dive into their characters. They are happy in all aspects of the game. The upside. This player has nothing but upsides. They never have to be reminded when it is their turn. They always know exactly what they will do on their turn, even if the situation changed multiple times. They read all their spells and remember all their abilities. They ask probing questions of the other players to generate RP moments. They keep the game moving when needed and take notes like a stenographer. They assist the other characters, freeing up the DM to manage the game. They step into the spotlight when it is their turn, but then step out and let another player step in. The downside. There is no downside to this player. This is the player the DM want all their players to be. The key. Take the time to do everything you can at the table to the best of your ability. You don't have to do voices, but you do have to get into character. You take good notes. Do you enjoy all the aspects of the game? The All-Star does all of these things and more. Typical classes. All-Stars tend to play whatever class the party needs. They aren't locked into always playing one or two classes. Chances are the All-Star has played every class and usually more than once each. All these roles have a part to play at a table for D&D. All have their upsides and their downsides. The key is maximizing the up while minimizing the down. There is a chance you fill more than one of these roles. I usually am the instigator and the note taker, while I may dabble in the others. Except for Theater Kid, that's just not in my wheelhouse. All players believe they are all-stars, but their DMs and other players may disagree, but it's definitely something to shoot for. So, what roles do you tend to fill at the table? Has those roles changed over time? Leave me a comment below. Also, let me know what roles you fill and what classes you play. I'm curious as to how that all maps out. Thanks, as always, to @KMarie. She's the artist behind the logos you see in my videos, my merch site, and across social media. Be sure to join my Discord channel, check out my merch site, and follow me on social media. Links to all those in the description. If you are a DM, check out my Dungeon Master Tips playlist for DM tips. If you are a player, be sure to check out my Player Tips playlist too. I also have a couple videos up regarding the new 2024 rules, so if you're interested in how the new rules are in actual play, be sure to check them out too. Thanks for watching. Remember to be kind to each other, accept each other, and love each other. Now let's roll some dice.